So often we have a sense that we need to understand. We need to really know what God is doing. We get hung up on that. God, how could you let this happen? We get hung up on the injustice. And are there times when that might be something that's holding us back? As we've looked a little bit about the life of Joseph, and I call it the story of us. Why? There's a little bit of Joseph in each one of us. And why is that? See, God wants to do so much more in and through us. There's so much more He wants to do through you and release through you. And there's so much more He wants to give you and I. But we have to mature into those mighty men and women that He has for us to be, to do it. And the problem is we look at how that process works. And frankly, we think we would never do it that way. It's just not nice. You look at Joseph, and in so many of our lives, it's like, God, that's just not fair. And we want to understand. And let me tell you, that need to understand does not help us progress. See, we have to learn. This is part of learning to trust God. Because, and I can say, I'll share in a moment just a little bit in our journey where I had to get past that need to understand because it only held me back. And so this episode is a little bit different because what I want to do is I want to talk about the things to let go of, the things that can hold us back from becoming all that God has for us to be. And you look at the life of Joseph. Here's a guy who, what happened? Well, first off, he had a dream. The challenge for you and I want to share this with you, and I've learned from experience in my own life, those dreams that you have, remember, I believe so many of those dreams are from God. But there can be a sense for some of us, maybe not you, for some of us that sense you've got to cling tightly to that dream. That if you let go of it, there's almost a feeling like it could dissolve and blow away like dust. That we have to hang on tightly to that dream to keep it alive. And you know what I've learned? No, we don't. We actually need to surrender that dream to God, who is faithful. And I'm not saying Joseph did it, but there's a beautiful part in this story where, Joseph has a dream, and we don't really hear about it again until later on. Now, he does have a bit of fun with him, which I'll talk a little bit more in a moment. The brothers come looking for food. They don't know who Joseph is. They just know he's the governor. And frankly, they're terrified of him. And they kneel before him. And it says, and Joseph remembered the dream. Now, I'm not saying he never thought about it all those years. But we don't see him clinging tightly to it. Frankly, I wonder if sometimes in prison at night, he's just like, yeah, that must not have been God. I must have missed that there. But I know from my personal experience, some of those dreams, well, not some of them, all of our dreams, God is faithful. He is trustworthy. We don't need to cling tightly to them. What do? We give them to Him. See, the problem is when we cling tightly to the dreams, we make them more important than God. And what is that? The Bible tells us when we do that, it's an idol. It's something between us and God. So whatever that dream is, whether it's a relationship lost, maybe it's a child that you want brought back to the Lord. These dreams can be completely righteous, but when we cling that tightly to them rather than surrendering them to God, we make them more important than He is. And trust me, I've done it. And I've had to learn to give those dreams to God. Let Him be the caretaker. He is trustworthy. And again, I love that where, you and I will have moments, just like when the brothers bowed to Joseph, where he remembered the dream. As we surrender these things to God, we will find there comes those moments when you look back and go, I remember the dream. God is faithful. We can't hold anything so tight that it becomes more important in our life than God. Number 2, what Joseph didn't do. Joseph had every opportunity to be resentful. We live in an era when we would believe Joseph had every right to take his revenge. He had every right to, at the minimum, rub their nose in it. say, look what you did. But we see nothing of that in Joseph. And see, that's what made him a man God could use. Now think about it. Joseph saved untold numbers of lives in Egypt, in Jacob's family, and who knows else in the surrounding areas. Only God knows a number of lives were saved through Joseph's actions. And on top of that, we saw that there was a greater eternal equation at work there. See, Joseph was someone God could entrust with a role like that because he learned not to allow unforgiveness to hold him back. He didn't hold resentment. Now, I will say this, and you got to love the honesty of the Bible. When the brothers came to him, we see Joseph did have a bit of fun with them. They didn't know it was him. And so, he gave them a little bit of the runaround and, made all kinds of, you're spies. And he really put the fear of God in them. But so he did have a bit of a sense of humor about it, I think. But we don't ever see him holding them responsible. In fact, what happened? They were terrified when they realized, and what did he say to them? Don't blame yourselves. You didn't do this to me, God did. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. Now that is so much easier said than done. We had a trial. I won't, because ours isn't compared to Joseph, but I understand what it's like to be falsely accused. And I understand what it's like for people to believe it in the heartbreak. And I do. I did. I cried out, God, why? And I struggled to understand. And we have to come to that point where we realize God has a greater purpose. People may believe some of these things that have been said for the rest of my life. And it's not fun, don't get me wrong. But okay, God, if somehow that serves your purposes, okay. See, what we saw in Joseph was he was able to forgive. We're told by Jesus that we're to forgive and forgive and forgive and keep forgiving. And that's a nice concept, but it's something that we struggle with. And especially in a world like we live in today where we have rights and we want to demand our rights. And so one of the things I want to share with us is this. We're told that as we humble ourselves, God will exalt us. And so how does that apply? What does that mean? How do we live that out? Let's not defend our rights. I challenge you and I. Those hurts in our lives, no matter who they came from, even if they were completely unjust, forgive. Let them go. Don't carry that baggage in your life. Not only does it slow you down, but it can prevent you from becoming all that God has for you to be. And as we let go of these things, as we humble ourselves and say, okay, Lord, if it serves your purposes, watch him exalt you. As we look at the life of Joseph, what we see is everything God used to develop him into a mighty man of God that God could use amazingly. And so what I'm sharing today is this. I'm challenging you and I to not let things in our life hold us back, not let resentment, frustration, even if they're entirely justified. That's not how God works. And we let them go. We give it to God and let him work. And we see what God will make out of it. And there comes the point where we see not just did God have a greater purpose, but in many cases we'll see an eternal perspective.